The stars above Earth had witnessed countless moments in human history, but none quite like this. On a cold November morning, every screen, every device, every communications system on the planet suddenly displayed the same message. It was not in English, or Chinese, or any human language. Yet somehow everyone understood it perfectly. Attention, inhabitants of the third planet. You are hereby notified that your world has been claimed by the Calrixian Empire. Your species will submit to imperial authority. You have 72 hours to comply. Commander Zelthrin stood on the bridge of the Imperial assessment vessel, watching the primitive planet rotate slowly below. His 4 eyes studied the blue and green world with practiced efficiency. 40 years of service to the Empire had taught him to recognize value when he saw it. This planet was rich beyond measure. Water covered most of its surface. The preliminary scans showed deposits of rare minerals that would take decades to extract. The Empire would profit greatly from this conquest. Commander, the natives are transmitting responses, his communications officer reported. Thousands of different signals. They seem confused. Zelthrin's mandibles clicked in amusement. Of course they are confused. They are a divided species. Our intelligence shows they cannot even agree on basic governance of their own world. They fight each other over invisible lines drawn on maps. They will not mount any coordinated resistance. He had seen this pattern before. Primitive species always reacted the same way. First came denial, then panic, then desperate attempts at negotiation. Finally, submission. It was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak served. The Empire had perfected this process across 40 star systems. On Earth, the confusion Zelthrin predicted was very real. World leaders scrambled to emergency meetings. Military commanders put their forces on highest alert. Scientists worked frantically to understand the technology that had hijacked their communications. Religious leaders prayed. Parents held their children close. The world had never been so united in fear, yet so divided in response. The President of the United States stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by advisors and generals. "What are our options?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would not be good. "Limited, Madam President," replied the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. "We've tracked 17 vessels in orbit. Our best analysis suggests technology centuries beyond our capability. Maybe millennia. If we launch everything we have, we would lose," she finished for him. "How long would we last?" The general's face was grim. "Hours. Maybe days if we're lucky. Their ships have some kind of energy shielding. Our missiles just bounce off." Similar conversations happened in Moscow, Beijing, London, New Delhi, and every other capital city. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity was outmatched in every measurable way. Some leaders argued for immediate surrender. Others demanded resistance regardless of cost. The United Nations called an emergency session that devolved into shouting matches in a dozen languages. The 72 hours passed like a countdown to doomsday. Commander Zelthrin watched the chaos with satisfaction. The natives had not agreed on any unified response. Their primitive radio transmissions showed them arguing among themselves, blaming each other, unable to form consensus. Perfect. The Empire's psychological profile had been accurate. This species was too fractured to pose any real threat. "Begin the pacification operation," Zelthrin ordered. The Calrixian fleet moved with practiced precision. Kinetic weapons struck military installations across the globe. Not enough to destroy the cities. Just enough to prove the futility of resistance. Bases in America, Russia, and China erupted in columns of fire. Aircraft carriers disappeared beneath waves. Underground bunkers collapsed. The Empire's doctrine was clear. Demonstrate overwhelming superiority, break their will to fight, then move to occupation. Earth's militaries responded with everything they had. Fighter jets scrambled. Missiles launched. Ships opened fire. For a brief, desperate moment, humanity showed what it could do. The sky lit up with weapons fire. But it was like throwing stones at gods. The Calrixian shields absorbed everything. Energy weapons vaporized missiles in mid-flight. Human aircraft fell from the sky in burning arcs. When a particularly brave pilot managed to ram his jet into a Calrixian vessel, the ship barely registered the impact. Major Sarah Chen ejected from her crippled F-35 over the Pacific, watching her entire squadron die in the span of 30 seconds. As her parachute deployed, she saw the alien ships hanging in the sky like dark stars, untouchable, unstoppable. She had trained her entire life to defend her country. But how do you fight something so far beyond your capability? The question echoed across every military base, every command center, every foxhole, where human soldiers watched the sky with growing dread. Within a week, the major population centers had fallen, not destroyed. The Empire wanted the infrastructure intact, but occupied. Calrixian dropships descended on every continent. Soldiers in advanced armor marched through the streets of New York, London, Tokyo, Lagos. They moved with the confidence of conquerors who had done this many times before. Commander Zelthrin established his command center in what the humans called Geneva. The symbolic value pleased him. This had been their center for international cooperation. Now it would be the seat of imperial authority. He reviewed the casualty reports with satisfaction. Minimal Calrixian losses. Acceptable human casualties. The conquest had been efficient. Begin construction of the extraction facilities, he ordered. Focus on the mineral-rich regions first. Relocate the native populations as needed. His officers moved to execute the commands. Massive machines began descending from orbit. Within days, enormous strip mines scarred the landscape. Refineries rose from nothing. The Empire's resource extraction began in earnest, just as it had on dozens of other conquered worlds. Zelthrin filed his official report. Planet designated Sector 7,719-3 conquered. Native species classified. Category 4. Minimal threat. Population, approximately 8 billion. Technology level, primitive. Recommendation: proceed with standard occupation protocol. The natives are defeated. This campaign is concluded. But in 1,000 cities, in 10,000 towns, in hidden places across every continent, something was beginning. Small groups gathered in secret. Weapons were hidden away. Plans were whispered in the dark. The Calrixians had won every battle. They had conquered every nation. They had broken every army. What they had not broken was the thing that made humans dangerous. In a bombed-out building in Shanghai, a former general met with a group of scientists and soldiers. "They think we're beaten," he said quietly. "Let them think that. Let them believe their own reports." In the Australian outback, a mining engineer studied fragments of a crashed Calrixian drone, her hands steady despite the fear in her heart. In the mountains of Afghanistan, where humans had resisted empires for thousands of years, fighters cleaned their weapons and studied their new enemy. The Calrixians had classified humanity as defeated. They had followed their protocols perfectly. They had done everything right, according to centuries of imperial doctrine. They had made only one mistake. They had assumed that military defeat meant surrender. They had assumed that overwhelming force meant submission. They had assumed that humans would accept their conquest because the alternative was futile. They were about to learn how wrong assumptions could be. The Calrixian occupation government settled into its routine with bureaucratic efficiency. Commander Zelthrin had been promoted to planetary administrator, a reward for his successful conquest. He now oversaw the systematic cataloging of Earth's resources, its population, and its potential labor force. The work was tedious, but necessary. Every conquered world required the same meticulous documentation. In his ornate office in Geneva, Zelthrin reviewed reports from his subordinates. The extraction facilities were operating at 70% capacity. ahead of schedule. The native population centers were being reorganized into more efficient layouts. The human governments had been dissolved and replaced with imperial administrators. Everything was proceeding according to the standard occupation manual that had been refined over centuries. The natives are remarkably docile, his chief cultural officer reported during a morning briefing. Much easier to manage than the Torvians or the Quell. They seem to understand that resistance is pointless. Zelthrin clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. What is their classification status? Category 4. Minimal threat species. As you designated. We've cataloged their weapons, their social structures, their biological makeup. Nothing of concern. They lack the genetic aggression markers of warrior species. Their technological development follows predictable patterns. In summary, Administrator, they are simply another conquered race. Unremarkable in every way except the value of their planet's resources. The report pleased Zelthrin. He had dozens of other conquered species in the Imperial database. Humanity would join that long list of civilizations that had learned to accept their place in the natural order. The strong ruled. The weak served. This was the way of the galaxy. But in the ruins of Detroit, former auto workers were learning to do something they had done for over a century. Adapt and build. They studied pieces of Calrixian technology, scavenged from crashed drones and damaged vehicles. The alien machines were advanced. Yes, but they were still machines. They had parts. They had systems. They could be understood. This power coupling. A retired engineer named Marcus said, holding up a strange crystalline component. It's not magic. It's just technology we haven't figured out yet. Look here, this connects to this. Energy flows through these channels. Around him, workers and scientists and soldiers watched with intense focus. They had no fancy laboratories anymore. No supercomputers. Just their hands, their minds, and a desperate need to understand the tools of their conquerors. In the mountains of Columbia, resistance fighters discovered something interesting. The Calrixian soldiers, for all their advanced armor and weapons, could still be killed. It required careful planning and perfect execution, but it could be done. A sniper with a stolen energy rifle could pierce their shields if the shot hit at exactly the right angle. An ambush in a narrow canyon could overwhelm their tactical advantages. They were not gods. They were just soldiers. We got 3 of them, the resistance leader reported, over a heavily encrypted radio channel. Lost 8 of our people. But we got 3. And we took their weapons. Across the globe, similar reports began filtering through underground networks. The Calrixians could be hurt. They could die. And every time they died, humans learned something new. Commander Zelthrin first heard about the attacks as minor incidents. Bandits. Criminals. The remnants of the old order refusing to accept reality. He assigned additional security details to the extraction facilities and sent patrols into the areas where resistance had been reported. The problem would be handled through standard security protocols. But the attacks did not stop. They increased. In Tokyo, a Calrixian supply depot exploded in the night. In Cairo, an entire patrol vanished into the crowded markets and was found days later, stripped of weapons and armor. In Sao Paulo, humans somehow infiltrated a communications hub and destroyed 6 months of cataloging data. In Moscow, snipers killed a senior administrator from a building 2 kilometers away. These incidents are becoming problematic. Zelthrin admitted during a security briefing 3 months into the occupation. Why are they escalating? The natives should understand. They cannot win. His security chief, a scarred veteran of a dozen campaigns, studied the reports with growing concern. Administrator, I believe we may have misclassified this species. They do not behave like Category 4 species. Category 4 species accept occupation after military defeat. These humans, they fight like Category 2 species. Category 2. Zelthrin's voice held disbelief. That classification is for species with deep cultural military traditions. The Korothians. The Velkar. Species that have been warriors for millennia. These humans are merchants and farmers. They have spent more of their history trading than fighting. Then explain this, the security chief said, displaying a tactical map. 17 attacks in the last week alone, coordinated across 5 continents. They are learning our patrol patterns. They are studying our tactics. They are adapting. Administrator. Category 4. Species do not adapt like this. Zelthrin stared at the map. Red markers indicated every attack, every ambush, every act of sabotage. The pattern was clear. The resistance was growing, and it was learning. On Earth, something remarkable was happening. Humans who had spent decades fighting each other were now fighting side by side. American soldiers trained Chinese civilians in guerrilla tactics. Russian engineers shared knowledge with African mechanics. Israeli and Palestinian fighters coordinated ambushes. The old borders, the old hatreds, they had not disappeared. But they had been set aside in the face of a greater enemy. Dr. Sarah Morrison worked in a hidden laboratory beneath the ruins of Cambridge University. Before the invasion, she had been researching quantum computing. Now she studied Calrixian computer systems, looking for vulnerabilities. Around her, scientists from 30 different countries worked on similar problems. They shared everything. No patents, no secrets, no competition. Only survival. "I think I found something," she announced one evening, her eyes red from exhaustion. "Their command network uses a quantum encryption system, but it has a weakness. If we can generate enough interference on these specific frequencies, we can blind their communications for short periods." The military advisor assigned to her lab, a former Navy SEAL named Jackson, immediately understood the implications. "How short?" "Maybe 30 seconds. Maybe a minute." "That's enough," Jackson said. "That's enough to hit them before they can call for backup." The technology was shared across the resistance networks within days. Crude jamming devices built from scavenged parts and human ingenuity. They did not work perfectly, but they worked well enough. Commander Zelthrin requested reinforcements from the Imperial fleet. His report was direct and uncomfortable. The native resistance is proving more persistent than anticipated. Current security forces are adequate for occupation duties, but insufficient for active counterinsurgency operations. Request an additional combat legion and tactical support vessels. The response from Imperial Command was less than sympathetic. Administrator Zelthrin, you are occupying a Category 4 species with technology centuries behind the Empire. Your request for additional forces is denied. Adapt your current resources to meet the challenge. These attacks are merely the death throes of a defeated people. They will exhaust themselves soon enough. But the attacks did not exhaust themselves. They intensified. The Calrixians began suffering casualties that would have been unthinkable in the early days of occupation. A patrol here. A checkpoint there. An officer assassinated. A transport destroyed. Each incident was small. But there were so many incidents, and with each one, the humans learned something new. They studied the tactics, they analyzed the responses, they adapted. Major Sarah Chen, who had ejected from her fighter on the first day of the invasion, now led a resistance cell in California. She had been a pilot. Now she was a guerrilla fighter. She had gone from flying million-dollar jets to planting improvised explosives. But she was still fighting. Still refusing to accept defeat. "They think we're Category 4, she told her team as they prepared for a raid on a supply convoy. "They think we're beaten. Let's show them what Category 4 can do." The raid was a success. The convoy was destroyed. 2 Calrixian soldiers were killed, 3 wounded. The humans melted back into the countryside, before reinforcements arrived. By the time Calrixian security forces reached the site, there was nothing to find but burning wreckage and empty roads. Commander Zelthrin stood over the wreckage 2 days later, his 4 eyes studying the scene with growing unease. The attack had been surgical, professional. The humans had known exactly where to hit, exactly when to strike, exactly how to escape. This was not the work of desperate refugees. This was military precision. Category 4, he murmured to himself, a cold feeling settling in his chest. These are not Category 4. Around the planet, in 1,000 hidden places, humans prepared for the next strike. They cleaned their stolen weapons. They studied their scavenged technology. They planned their attacks. They were outmatched, outgunned, occupied by an empire that spanned the stars. But they had not surrendered. And they were learning, fast. The Calrixian Empire had conquered Earth. But conquering a planet and holding it were 2 very different things. And the Empire was about to learn a lesson that their centuries of dominance had never taught them. Some species do not know when they are beaten. The labor camps were the Empire's greatest mistake, though they would not realize it for months. Commander Zelthrin had approved their construction as a practical matter. The extraction facilities needed workers. The human population needed to be controlled and organized. The solution was efficient. Consolidate large numbers of humans in camps near the mining sites, where they could be properly supervised and put to productive use. It was standard imperial policy. It had worked on every other conquered world. The camp outside of what used to be Denver held 50,000 humans. Engineers, scientists, former soldiers, teachers, doctors, people from every walk of life, thrown together behind energy fences and guard towers. The Calrixians expected compliance. They expected broken spirits. They expected a defeated people to accept their new reality as laborers for the Empire. What they got instead was something entirely different. Dr. James Wright had been a physics professor at MIT. Now he worked 12-hour shifts hauling ore in the Denver camp. But at night, in the cramped barracks, he was something else. He was a teacher again, and his students were very motivated. The guard towers operate on a synchronized power grid, he explained in whispers to the group gathered around him. Every tower connects to the central generator. That is their weakness. If we can overload the grid, even for a few seconds, we can create a gap in their coverage. How do we overload it? Asked a woman who had been an electrical engineer in her previous life. We build a surge device. Nothing complicated. We only need to create a massive spike in the power draw at exactly the right moment. Around the camp, similar conversations were happening. Former military officers taught tactics and strategy. Engineers sketched plans in the dirt. Chemists figured out how to make explosives from the materials available in the camp. Doctors prepared for the casualties they knew would come. Slowly, carefully, hidden from the guards, a plan took shape. The same thing was happening in camps across the planet. In Australia, in Brazil, in India, in South Africa, everywhere the Calrixians had concentrated humans for efficient management. They had accidentally concentrated human knowledge, human skills, and human determination. Major Sarah Chen had been captured 3 months earlier. Her resistance cell had been ambushed, and she had been one of the few survivors. Now she found herself in a camp in California, surrounded by thousands of other prisoners. The Calrixians had processed her like all the others. Category: laborer. Threat level: minimal. They had not bothered to check her background. To them, all humans looked the same. She found the other soldiers within a week. They recognized each other through small signs. The way someone stood, the way they moved, the way they watched their surroundings. Military discipline did not disappear just because you took away the uniform. We have contacts in 11 other camps. a former Marine colonel told her during a work shift. "We are coordinating. 3 months from now, on a date we will communicate later. Every camp hits their guards at the same time." "That's suicide," Sarah said. "We don't have weapons. They have energy rifles and armor." "We will have weapons," the colonel replied. "We are making them. And we will take theirs. It's going to be bloody. A lot of us are going to die. But if we can break out of even half these camps, we can get organized. Real organized. Not just resistance cells. An actual fighting force." Sarah looked around the camp. Thousands of people, all of them trapped, all of them living under the thumb of an alien empire. "Count me in," she said. The coordination was done through the most primitive means possible. Verbal messages passed through work crews that rotated between camps. Scratched symbols on equipment that moved between facilities. Songs sung at night with lyrics that encoded instructions. The Calrixians monitored communications, but they could not monitor everything, and they did not understand the depth of human creativity when it came to sending secret messages. The date was set. The plans were finalized. In 12 camps across 4 continents, the preparations were complete. Commander Zelthrin received the first report at dawn. "Administrator, we have a situation at Camp Delta 7. The power grid has failed, and prisoners are attempting to breach the perimeter." Before he could respond, 3 more reports came in rapid succession. Camps across the globe were erupting in coordinated uprisings. The timing was identical. The tactics were similar. This was not spontaneous. This was planned. "How is this possible?" Zelthrin demanded. "We monitor their communications. We control their movements. How did they coordinate across the entire planet?" His security chief had no answer. But the reports kept coming. Camp after camp. Prisoners overwhelming guards through sheer numbers and desperate fury. The Calrixians had better weapons, better armor, better technology. But there were 50,000 humans in each camp, and only a few hundred guards. At the Denver camp, the attack began when the power grid failed exactly as Dr. Wright had calculated. The guard towers went dark for 8 seconds. In that brief window, humans rushed the fences. Some died on the still-active lower sections. Others made it through. The Calrixian guards fired into the mass of humanity, their energy weapons cutting down dozens. But there were thousands. James Wright never made it past the first fence. He was shot in the chest and died within seconds. But his students kept running. They reached the armory. They overwhelmed the guards through sheer numbers, suffering terrible casualties but refusing to stop. They seized weapons. They seized armor. They seized vehicles. By the time Calrixian reinforcements arrived, half the camp's population had escaped into the mountains, armed and organized. Major Sarah Chen was luckier. Her camp's breakout was more successful. The guards were caught completely off guard by the coordinated attack. She personally killed 2 Calrixian soldiers with her bare hands before seizing an energy rifle. The weapon felt strange in her hands, heavier than anything she had trained with. But the trigger was still a trigger. She pointed and fired, and her training took over. "Move! Move! Move!" she shouted, leading a group toward the vehicle depot. Around her, humans fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Some carried improvised weapons. Others fought with stolen rifles. The guards shot many of them down, but there were always more. Always more humans running forward, refusing to stop, refusing to accept defeat. The camp fell within an hour. 3,000 humans died in the breakout, but 15,000 escaped, taking with them weapons, vehicles, and most importantly, intact computer systems filled with Imperial data. Of the 12 camps that launched coordinated uprisings, 6 succeeded in full breakouts. 3 more achieved partial escapes. 3 were completely suppressed, with thousands of human casualties. But even in defeat, Those 3 camps tied down massive Calrixian security forces for critical hours. Commander Zelthrin watched the reports with growing horror. In a single day, the Empire had lost control of 9 labor camps. Tens of thousands of humans were now loose, armed with Imperial weapons, and moving toward pre-planned rally points. The casualties were staggering. Over 8,000 humans killed. But they had also killed over 600 Calrixian soldiers and seized enough equipment to arm a small army. This was not Category 4, his security chief said grimly. Category 4 species do not plan operations of this complexity. They do not sacrifice thousands of their own to achieve tactical objectives. They do not coordinate across continents without detectable communications. Administrator, we need to reclassify this species immediately. And we need reinforcements. Not additional security. Combat forces, said. A full battle group. Zelthrin knew his subordinate was right. But he also knew what such a request would mean for his career. He had conquered this planet in a week. He had assured Imperial Command that the occupation was stable. And now he had to admit that he had lost control. Send the request, he said finally. Full combat deployment, authorization for heavy weapons, and update the species classification to Category 2. Warrior culture. High resistance to occupation. Extreme adaptability. But even as he sent the message, Zelthrin knew the truth. The humans were not Category 2. Category 2 species were predictable. They had warrior traditions that could be understood and countered. These humans were something else entirely. They were chaotic, unpredictable. They adapted not just quickly, but constantly. Every time the Empire learned how they fought, they changed tactics. Unquote. In the mountains of Colorado, Sarah Chen stood before a group of survivors. 3,000 people had made it out of the camp. Many were wounded. All were exhausted. But they were free, and they were armed. The Empire thinks we're broken, she told them. They think this was our last desperate act. They're wrong. This was not the end. This was the beginning. We have weapons now. We have organization. And we have something they do not understand. We have nothing left to lose, and everything to fight for. Around the planet, similar scenes played out. Human survivors, gathering in hidden places, taking stock of their captured equipment, planning their next moves. The Calrixians had broken the camps, but they had not broken the humans. Instead, they had given them something dangerous. They had given them hope, and an angry human with hope was something the Empire had never encountered before. The arrival of the Imperial battle fleet should have ended the human resistance. 3 battlecruisers, 12 destroyers, support vessels carrying 20,000 combat troops, and enough firepower to level cities. This was not a peacekeeping force. This was a military hammer designed to crush any opposition. Admiral Carthex commanded the fleet from his flagship, a vessel that had seen action in the Velkar campaigns decades ago. He reviewed the situation reports with professional interest. A Category 2 species causing problems on a newly occupied world. Unfortunate things. This video. N1. But not unprecedented. The solution was simple and proven. Overwhelming force. Decisive strikes. Break their will and their capability simultaneously. This should take no more than a few weeks, he told Commander Zelthrin during their first communication. Your security forces have handled insurgencies. We handle wars. By the time we are finished, these humans will remember why they surrendered in the first place. Zelthrin wanted to warn him, wanted to explain that these humans were different. But he had no proof, only a feeling. And feelings did not carry weight in Imperial military doctrine. So he said nothing and watched as the battle fleet descended to begin operations. The humans watched the fleet arrive through stolen surveillance systems. In hidden bunkers across the planet, Resistance leaders looked at the display of Imperial might and felt their hearts sink. This was beyond anything they had faced before. The original occupation force had been small, designed for pacification. This was a real, military force. "We cannot fight that," a Brazilian general said, staring at the tactical display. "Those battle cruisers could destroy every city on the planet. If they wanted to, they could kill us all from orbit. Then we don't fight them head-on." Major Sarah Chen replied. She had become one of the Resistance's primary tactical coordinators, respected for her military experience and her ruthless practicality. "We do what we have been doing. We hit where they are not looking. We adapt faster than they can respond, and we make them bleed. That fleet has enough firepower to glass half the planet. Then we make sure it costs them to use it." The unified human resistance had come together in the months since the camp breakouts. Not a formal government, there was no time for that, but a network of cells and groups that shared intelligence, coordinated operations, and worked toward a common goal. Former rivals sat in the same planning sessions. Old enemies fought side by side. The invasion had done what centuries of human diplomacy could not. It had united Earth under a single banner: survival. Admiral Carthex launched his campaign with textbook precision. Intelligence gathering, target identification, surgical strikes on known resistance bases. But the humans did not fight the way the textbooks predicted. The bases his ships bombed were mostly empty, evacuated hours before the strikes. The supply lines he interdicted were decoys. The command centers he targeted did not exist. Instead, the humans hit back in ways that confused and frustrated the Imperial forces. A destroyer that landed for maintenance was sabotaged, its engines destroyed by infiltrators who disappeared into the local population. A supply convoy was ambushed, using tactics that should not have worked against armored vehicles, but somehow did. A communications relay was destroyed by a suicide bomber, who walked through security with a false identity badge and explosives hidden in a medical device. "They are not fighting like Category 2, Admiral Carthex admitted after a month of operations. Category 2 species defend territory. They hold positions. They fight for honor and glory. These humans do none of that. They fight like they are trying to kill us and do not care about glory." His tactical officer finished. "They fight like the goal is not victory, but maximum damage to our forces." It was true. The humans had accepted something that no honorable warrior culture would accept. They could not win a conventional war, so they were not fighting a conventional war. They were fighting a war of attrition, and they were willing to trade lives at ratios that shocked the Calrixians. A human attack that killed 3 Imperial soldiers and cost 20 human lives was considered a success. A bombing that destroyed a supply depot at the cost of the bomber's life was celebrated across the resistance networks. Every Calrixian casualty was a victory. Every destroyed vehicle was progress. Every delayed operation was a small triumph. The Imperial casualties mounted slowly but steadily. 10 soldiers here, 20 there, a ship damaged, an officer killed. None of it was decisive, but it added up, and every death was reported back to the Empire, where other conquered species watched with growing interest. On the planet Torvax, occupied by the Empire for 30 years, the news of human resistance sparked something that had been dormant for decades. If humans could fight back, why could they not? On Quell Prime, resistance cells that had gone silent began reorganizing. On 3 other worlds, small acts of sabotage began occurring. Nothing major, but it was starting. The Empire's intelligence services noticed. And they were concerned. The human resistance is having an effect beyond their planet. The report to Imperial Command stated. Their actions are inspiring resistance movements on multiple occupied worlds. This is unprecedented. Subject species do not typically support each other's resistance efforts, but the humans have become a symbol. If we cannot suppress them decisively, We risk larger destabilization. The pressure on Admiral Carthex increased. Suppress the resistance. Restore order. Do it quickly, and do it publicly. The Empire needed a victory to demonstrate that resistance was futile. But the humans would not cooperate. Dr. Sarah Morrison and her team of scientists achieved something remarkable in their hidden laboratory. They had been studying Calrixian technology for months, taking apart every piece of equipment they could capture. And they found something interesting. The ships used a quantum entanglement system for communications. It was faster than light. It was encrypted. It was nearly impossible to intercept. But it was not impossible to disrupt. If we can generate a quantum decoherence field at the right frequency, she explained to the military advisors, we can jam their communications. Not permanently, and not at long range, but for a few minutes, in a small area, we can blind them. How small an area? Asked Sarah Chen. Maybe 100 kilometers, maybe less, and we can only maintain it for a few minutes before the generators burn out. Sarah Chen smiled. That's enough. The device was crude. Built from stolen components and human engineering, it would work once, maybe twice, before it destroyed itself. But once was enough. The ambush was planned for 3 weeks later, a supply convoy traveling through the Rocky Mountains. According to intercepted communications, the convoy would be protected by 2 destroyers, providing aerial cover and a company of Imperial troops on the ground. It should have been safe. The humans did not have weapons capable of threatening destroyers. But when the convoy entered the mountain pass, the quantum decoherence device activated. For exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the destroyers could not communicate with each other, with the ground forces, or with Fleet Command. They were blind. That was when the humans struck. Missiles that had been useless against shields weeks ago now worked. The scientists had figured out the shield frequency and how to modulate weapons to penetrate them. Not reliably, not perfectly, but well enough. One destroyer took critical damage and crashed into the mountainside. The other retreated, its shields failing under sustained fire. The ground convoy was destroyed by troops who had trained for this moment. Stolen energy weapons, captured armor, human tactics adapted to alien technology. The battle lasted 12 minutes. 73 Imperial soldiers died. The convoy was destroyed. Every vehicle was stripped for parts and technology. The humans lost 215 fighters. They considered it a bargain. News of the battle spread across the planet. Humans had destroyed a protected convoy and shot down a destroyer. It was proof that the Empire could be hurt, that their technology could be countered, that adaptation and determination could overcome superior firepower. Admiral Carthex read the battle reports with growing dread. The humans had killed 73 of his soldiers in a single engagement. They had destroyed a destroyer. They had used technology they should not have been able to develop for decades. And most troubling of all, they had done it with tactics he did not understand and could not predict. They are adapting faster than we can respond, he told Commander Zelthrin. Every time we develop a counter to their tactics, they change. Every time we close a vulnerability, they find a new one. This is not normal warfare. This is something else. Zelthrin nodded. He had known this for months. But now the fleet admiral was seeing it too. What do you recommend? Zelthrin asked. I recommend we acknowledge the truth, Carthex said quietly. We are not fighting a Category 2 species. We are fighting something that should not exist. A species with primitive technology, but advanced tactical thinking. A species willing to accept casualties that would break any rational military force. A species that adapts like water, flowing around every obstacle we place. I do not know what category that is. But I know we cannot defeat them with conventional methods. Then what do you suggest? Admiral Carthex was silent for a long moment. Then he said words that no Imperial admiral had spoken in 3 generations. I suggest We cannot hold this planet without exterminating the native population. And if we attempt extermination, we will create a martyrdom that could destabilize half the empire. In bunkers across Earth, resistance leaders celebrated their victory. They had hurt the empire, really hurt it, but they also knew what might come next. An enemy that cannot win conventionally might resort to final solutions. The humans had proven they could resist. Now, they had to prove they could survive what came next. And in the Imperial fleet, Admiral Carthex made his decision. If conventional warfare would not work, then he would use unconventional means. He would not exterminate the humans. But he would break their will to resist once and for all. He ordered the bombardment fleet to prepare. If the humans wanted war, he would give them war. And they would learn why the Empire had ruled the stars for centuries. The intelligence came through multiple sources, all confirming the same terrifying information. The Empire was assembling a bombardment fleet. 12 dreadnoughts, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a continent. They were not coming to occupy. They were coming to destroy. "We have 72 hours," Major Sarah Chen told the assembled resistance leaders in the hidden bunker beneath what used to be Denver. The mood in the room was grim. Everyone understood what this meant. They are going to position the dreadnoughts in high orbit and systematically destroy every major population center. We estimate they can glass the entire surface of the planet in 3 days if they commit to full bombardment. "Can we evacuate?" someone asked. "To where?" "They control orbit. They control the air. And even if we could hide everyone underground, what then? We surface to a dead planet? We cannot run from this." The room fell silent. They had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and now it was going to end with fire from the sky. A former Chinese general named Wei spoke up. "Then we do not run. We do not hide. We attack." "Attack?" Sarah Chen stared at him. "Attack a fleet of dreadnoughts? With what? We have managed to destroy some destroyers. We have stolen some weapons. But we are talking about the most powerful ships in the Imperial fleet. They could obliterate everything we have without even landing." "Then we make sure they cannot?" Wei said calmly. "The dreadnoughts will be in high orbit. They will be vulnerable during positioning. If we can get to them before they begin bombardment, we have a chance." How do we get to high orbit? We do not have a space program anymore. The Empire destroyed our satellites and our launch facilities months ago. Wei smiled grimly. "No. They destroyed our official facilities. But there are others. Hidden ones. Projects that were kept secret even from our own governments. And we have something else. We have captured Imperial shuttles. We have pilots who have studied Calrixian navigation systems. It will be suicide. But it is possible." Around the room, understanding dawned. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the only option they had left. Sarah Chen felt something settle in her chest. A strange calm. If we are going to die anyway, we might as well die fighting. "How many pilots do we have who can fly captured shuttles?" "Calls. 230 volunteers?" Wei replied. "Former astronauts. Test pilots. Anyone with the skill and the courage. They all know it is a one-way mission. They volunteered anyway. Of course they did." Sarah thought. That was the thing about humans. They could accept impossible odds. They could accept certain death. What they could not accept was surrender. The plan came together quickly because there was no time for anything else. Every captured shuttle would be loaded with volunteers and improvised weapons. Nuclear warheads from the old arsenal that had somehow survived the initial invasion. Explosives built from stolen Imperial technology. Every ship would become a weapon. The goal was simple: reach the dreadnoughts and damage them Kill them. Stop them from killing Earth. The survival rate was estimated at 0%. Every volunteer understood this. They said goodbye to loved ones. They wrote final messages. They made peace with their fate. Major Sarah Chen found herself assigned to lead one of the strike teams. She had been a fighter pilot before the invasion. It seemed fitting that she would die in space. One way or another. Admiral Carthex watched his fleet assemble with satisfaction. The dreadnoughts were moving into position. In 3 days, the bombardment would begin. The human resistance would be destroyed. The planet would be made an example. Other conquered species would see what happened when you resisted the Empire. Order would be restored. Admiral, we are detecting unusual activity on the surface, his sensor officer reported. Multiple launches. Small craft. They appear to be heading toward orbit. Green B. AT. Carthex studied the display. Dozens of primitive shuttles rising from the planet. Stolen Imperial vessels, mixed with human spacecraft that should not even be capable of reaching orbital altitude. Unknown, Admiral. But their trajectory suggests they are heading toward the fleet. They are attacking us? Carthex could not keep the disbelief from his voice. With shuttles? They must know this is suicide. Orders, Admiral? Carthex considered. The shuttles were no threat to his dreadnoughts. Their shields could withstand meteor impacts. A few primitive spacecraft would be nothing. Let them come. We will destroy them and show the surface what happens to those who resist. It will make the lesson more complete. But as the shuttles approached, Carthex began to understand something terrible. The humans were not trying to shoot down his ships. They were trying to ram them. And they were not carrying just pilots. They were carrying bombs. Evasive action, he ordered. All ships, evasive maneuvers. They are suicide attackers. The battle that followed was like nothing in the Imperial military database. Human shuttles dove at the dreadnoughts with reckless abandon. Some were destroyed by defensive fire. Others were caught by tractor beams. But some got through. Sarah Chen piloted her shuttle straight at the nearest dreadnought. Defensive weapons fire lit up her displays. Her co-pilot was killed instantly. The shuttle's shields failed. Hull breaches erupted across the craft. But she kept flying. Kept the nose pointed at the massive ship ahead. In the cargo bay, a nuclear warhead armed itself automatically. For Earth, she whispered, and rammed her shuttle into the dreadnought's shield generator. The explosion was massive. The shield flickered and died. Before the dreadnought could recover, 3 more shuttles hit it, targeting the unshielded hull. Secondary explosions rippled across the massive vessel. Its reactor went critical. The dreadnought broke apart in a fireball that could be seen from the surface. Admiral Carthex watched in horror as 2 more dreadnoughts suffered similar fates. Human shuttles were everywhere, diving and dodging and ramming. His fleet was in chaos. These were not military tactics. This was mass suicide used as a weapon. And it was working. All ships, fire at will. Maximum defensive output. Do not let them get close. But for every shuttle destroyed, another got through. The humans were using their own ships as cover, their own deaths as distractions. They were not trying to survive. They were trying to kill. And dead men needed no shields or armor. On the surface, millions watched through stolen feeds. They saw their pilots die, saw the shuttles destroyed, saw the massive explosions as ships collided, and they cheered. Because mixed with the deaths, they saw dreadnoughts burning, saw the pride of the Imperial fleet dying in orbit. 3 dreadnoughts destroyed, 4 more crippled and unable to maintain position. The remainder had taken heavy damage. And the attack was not over. More shuttles rose from the surface. Ground-based weapons that had been hidden for this moment fired everything they had at the damaged ships. Then came the final gamble. A strike team had managed to board the fleet's command ship during the chaos. They were not trying to capture it. They were trying to destroy it. Led by the former Chinese General Wei, they fought through corridors and bulkheads, taking massive casualties but refusing to stop. Their goal was the reactor chamber. Admiral Carthex evacuated the command bridge as alarms screamed throughout the ship. "We have multiple hull breaches. Boarders have reached the engineering section. Admiral, we must abandon ship." "No, we cannot let these primitives." The explosion cut him off. General Wei had reached the reactor, and he had done what human engineers had learned to do over months of study. He had overloaded the antimatter containment. The command ship detonated with the force of a small star. The shockwave caught 3 other dreadnoughts at close range. Their shields were already weakened from the shuttle attacks. The electromagnetic pulse fried their systems. They went dark, floating dead in space. Of the 12 dreadnoughts that had come to destroy Earth, only 4 remained operational. And they were damaged, bleeding, vulnerable. The human attack had been suicidal. Over 3,000 pilots and soldiers had died. But they had broken the Empire's hammer. The remaining dreadnoughts retreated. They had not even begun the bombardment, and already they had lost 2/3 of their force to an enemy that should not have been able to touch them. It was a defeat that would echo through Imperial history. On Earth, the celebrations were muted. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. Thousands dead, cities damaged, resources exhausted. But they were alive. The planet was scarred, but intact. Commander Zelthran sent his final report to Imperial Command. It was not a report of victory. It was a warning. The species designated Sector 7719-3, commonly called humans, cannot be classified by standard metrics. They do not surrender after military defeat. They do not accept occupation as inevitable. They adapt to threats faster than we can deploy countermeasures. Most critically, they weaponize their own mortality. They are willing to trade lives at ratios that no rational species would accept, because they do not value survival above resistance. Recommendation: immediate withdrawal from their planet. Further recommendation: quarantine of their system. Final recommendation: add them to the protected species list with notation. Extreme threat. Do not engage under any circumstances. The Empire agreed. The occupation ended not with humanity's defeat, but with Imperial retreat. The Calrixians left Earth, taking their dead, and their damaged ships, and their wounded pride. They left behind a species that had been primitive and divided just a year before. They left behind a species that was now united, blooded, and armed with stolen technology they would spend the next decades learning to improve. As the last Imperial ship departed Earth's orbit, the human resistance broadcast a message. It was sent on all frequencies, in every language the Empire used. The message was simple. You came for our resources. You thought we would be easy prey. You were wrong. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not submit. We adapt. We endure. We fight. And if you ever return to our world, we will not just defend what is ours, we will take what is yours. This planet is under our protection. We have paid for it in blood, and we will kill anyone who tries to take it from us again. You have been warned. In the Imperial Archives, a new entry was created. Species: human. Classification: category unknown. Threat level: extreme. Recommended action: avoid all contact. Do not engage. Do not occupy. Do not provoke. The Empire had desired Earth's resources. What they got instead was a lesson they would never forget. Some species cannot be conquered. Some species do not know when they are beaten. And some species, when pushed to the edge, push back with a fury that breaks empires. Humanity was free, and the galaxy would remember why.